computer.
Got it.
Hey.
Got it.
We have Ross Perlmutter with us today.
How's
Ross?
it going, guys?
Ross is here from Canada. Our first, how would we just, our first, what do you guys call them? Canadian?
Agent.
Yeah.
Agents, yeah.
Our very first Canadian. This is our 9th episode of Talking Threadheads, and we are actually going to be posting this episode before we post episode 8. So if you lost track, we're aware. We're gonna post episode 8 next week while Chris is in Europe, right?
Mhm.
And episode 8 is like a bonus episode because it's on the longer side. So we're just gonna save it for next week since Chris is gonna be away. So anyhow, this is episode 9. If you've been paying attention, I started this week with a really bad cold, and I had like a lot of difficulty not sneezing and coughing when we interviewed Dan Sparkresson on Monday, and I'm healed. In episode 8, you will learn Dr. John Boutte helped heal me through his spirituality and recommendations, so I'm deeply grateful. Anyhow, back to today.
I just want to interrupt you for 1 minute. I was just thinking as you were talking, you and I, Nicole, should take the first like 20, 25 minutes of each interview just talking about us, ourselves, and then we can interview our guests for like a minute or two.
I'm so sorry.
Good. I'm entertained. I want to know how to get rid of a cold. I like this.
I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to hog your time, Ross. So
that's okay.
The floor is yours.
I think we're going to hear from his attorneys. I have no doubt about that.
Yeah. I just figured people wanted to know if I was feeling better, Chris. I'm sorry. Folks care. I know you don't care. No. Anyhow, back to Ross.
I'm a heartless bastard.
So happy to have Ross Perlmutter joining us today because you're such a character. You have amazing stories to tell. So let's get into it. When did you first attend Jazzfest? What was it like?
The first year I went, it was 1996. And it was really weird. This is going to tie in a little bit, but I had a friend of mine from Winnipeg who was a keyboard player. And he came down, and there was... He was telling me all about it, and he told me about seeing Little Feat on the President Riverboat. And I was just geeked because I was a huge Little Feat fan. I was just so envious of this guy, and I made it an issue to come down. My sister, Rhonda, she thought, I don't know if I want him going there by himself. So she would climb aboard. And yet for me, I was like, you need this. So we were both kind of working each other. And 96 was the first year that we did it together.
That's so cool. And so tell us what that experience was like.
Well, I remember one of the first things I remember was looking at the schedule before we left. And like, it always struck by this. And it said, it goes from like 11 till 7. I said, well, is that a rip off? What kind of a festival is this? Like 7 o'clock is lame. That's just weak. Like, you know, I figured this thing would go to 11 or something like that. And Rhonda was like, yeah, well, you know, well, whatever, we'll do it. We'll go have dinner. Well, like, it's a lot of stuff. We got there, I remember at 11 o'clock, and we hit the kids' tent. They had Hunter Hayes when he was about 10 years old. Then the Dixieland tent, right? And then just kind of worked our way around it. So and then gospel. By 12:30, we were horizontal. We were just out. I looked at Rhonda and I go, Rhonda, guess what time it is? 12:30. Oh my God, how are we going to make it through this day? So it was a bit of a culture shock for us because part of, you know, I don't want to perpetuate a stereotype, but when we go down there, it's April, you know, obviously here, and we're just coming out of winter. It's not even really spring yet. So, and Rhonda was in Winnipeg. It was pretty slushy. And you go from that to like, you know, 85 degrees and humidity. It can be a lot. So that first year was a real kick, but what a magical time. Just absolutely magical.
And how many have you been to now?
I think I was counting the other day. I think it's 23.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I missed a couple of years along the way. And I always say, like, some years I need Jazz Fest, and some years I want Jazz Fest. You know what I mean? There's never a time where it's like I'm just not interested in Jazz Fest, but there's definitely been years where I needed it. You know, we can all relate to I need Jazz Fest, right?
Absolutely. Talk to us about, we'll talk about your experience with nighttime shows in a minute, I'm sure, but tell us right now about 2 or 3 memorable performances from Jazz Fest itself.
Well, mine are a little different. I mean, I think that the first one is kind of an obvious choice, and you're going to hear it often, was the Springsteen show right after Katrina.
Mhm.
And, I mean, there's not a whole lot I can add that hasn't already been said. It was really a bizarre time. The fact that they even had a fest was amazing. And I was excited to see Bruce Springsteen. I thought this is great. What I didn't anticipate was just how, what a gut punch it would be half the way, halfway through it. I remember being there with a bunch of people and singing "We Shall Overcome" and just bawling, like just absolutely unbelievable. So, I mean, that was obviously a pretty magic time. I've had other ones though that were very different. Like one of the ones I was thinking about the other day was like a show I didn't go to, which was, and I don't mean to cast shadows on this because I'm a huge fan, but I remember Stevie Wonder playing, and I thought, wow, this will be great. I mean, Stevie Wonder and Sunshine and all these people, and you got all these songs in your head. And it happened to be the year that Obama was running, and so the first time he ran for president. And so he got up with Quint Davis beside him, and Quint introduced him. And he just put his hand on Quint's shoulder. He wouldn't let him leave. And for like 20 minutes, basically turned it into an Obama rally. And it got really like it was just awkward because, not everybody's an Obama fan. I am, but he was trying to get people to chant Obama, Obama, and you could see Quint was looking really awkward, and I thought, fine. This went on for about 20 minutes, and then he started performing, and he sang like 3 songs, and I just wasn't feeling it at all. So I went over to go see this other guy who I had heard about, but I hadn't seen before, Michael Franti.
Mm.
I got there, and I ran into Katie Locke, and she was standing, and it started to rain. And I mean, it really started to rain. And Michael Frampton at one point jumped off the stage and started grabbing umbrellas and going, "We don't need these umbrellas," and just like taking them from people's hands and throwing them. And then it started to pour. And we were like jumping up and down with ponchos on, absolutely one of the most joyous shows I've ever been to. And no regrets about walking away from Stevie Wonder. I mean, that's the beauty of Jazz Fest, that you can do that. I would never, pay $200 and walk out of a show at the arena, but I've done it to some big name acts, at Fest, and I remember that one was just special. That the year of Katrina was actually special on a lot of fronts. Like I was getting the same kind of feels from really crazy. At one point, I remember just crying my eyes out to Bo Dallas and the Wild Magnolias. Tears of joy, just because you sort of realized it was like, oh my God, it was so defiant and so strong, and we're back, and you just know that nowhere else on the planet could that be happening except in New Orleans, right then and there at that very moment. And yeah, really, really special. I think the last memory that I have is actually it's kind of a bad humble brag, but one of our fellow Threadheads, Linda Klyback, she works in travel and tourism. She works for a travel agency, and she was connected with the Sheraton. So one year she got me a pass for that Sheraton tent at Fade Odo, and the tent sort of juts out a bit. So I'm like, great, I don't know, what am I going to do with this thing? So I walk in there, and they say, oh, welcome. We have all these wines, and they're all rated 94 or higher by Wine Spectator. And we have Chilean sea bass, or you can have this and this. And they had Dove bars and a place to like charge up your cell phone. And there's this little area that kind of stuck out, and there was a table and a chair and an umbrella. And I was like right in front of the PA. And that day they had like Keb Mo, followed by John Hyatt, followed by somebody like the Mavericks. Like it was just insane. And it was packed. And I'm just sitting there in my own little chair, sipping my wine and waving at the hospitality woman, bring me a little bit more Chardonnay. Cause it was a wonderful day. It was like a private backyard concert with Keb Mo, and all these mean, really
Love
stuff.
that. That's great.
Yeah.
I mean, if anybody has extra passes for that, I'm very interested. I would do that.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. I always buzz by it every year and look at the guy and like, hey, how are you? Like, nothing.
Yeah.
I don't think
No pass.
our network allows us to take any comps like that. It's in our contract.
Oh, is that what it is?
Yeah.
That's probably why I've been shut out all these years.
I quit. That's it.
But
I'm
Yeah,
done.
you're done.
I pass it every year with envy. I mean, Dove bars, just all you can. I was having a time.
That reminds me of Swag always says don't leave good music for good music, but also offers the advice that if something's not working out, it's okay. There's how many other stages to go check out.
Well,
So
that was the thing. I mean, you asked about the first year. The first year was just such an eye opener for us. At one point, I remember walking with Rhonda, and we were on our way to what was then the Ray-Ban stage, which is now Gentilly. And we were booting our way over there to go see somebody. And then all of a sudden it was like, we just looked at each other. It's like, what is that? I go, I don't know, but we're going. And we went over and discovered Bella Fleck and the Flecktones.
Oh, nice.
We hadn't seen, and it was just like, I get goosebumps thinking about it. It was just joyous. It was unbelievable. We never made it over to Ray-Ban, but that was just, follow your ears and go, whatever this is, I'm totally digging it.
Yeah, it's where
And
you're supposed to be.
Well, and at that time too, it was a little bit different. I'm not that sentimental where it's like the olden days, but I remember that we had befriended a bunch of people from Shreveport, and they were a Mardi Gras crew called Centaur, and they just took these, Canadians under wing and made us their own, and they were hilarious. I mean, just characters. But Dave Matthews Band was playing that year, and he was just he really hadn't been around that long, but he had like ants marching and songs like that, so he was sort of coming up and drawing a lot of people. And it was my turn to go get the beer, so I trudge off through the crowd and I go over to get the beer, and I got like a dozen beer or something. The time was like $36, and I've got them in here filled full of ice, and I decided to take a detour back through the gospel tent. And I walked in there, and it was Aaron Neville and the Zion Harmonizers. And back then, they never pitched Aaron Neville. It was the Zion Harmonizers, and you just sort of knew that he was going to sit in, or he didn't. I didn't know. I walk in, and he's doing like Ave Maria, and like it's crazy. People are on their knees. People are crying. So I come back to this Dave Matthews craziness, and Rhonda says, "Oh, you look like you just saw God." I'm like, "I think I did. I had no idea. I don't know what that was. That was insane." But that was my first year.
so a pivot from seeing God. Tell us about this golf cart incident.
Oh my God. So I'm like honestly, I'm like semi-famous in certain circles down in New Orleans. And I don't know if you guys knew about this or not, but it's such a typical Threadhead thing that somebody made a comment once on the Jazzfest board, and it was right before the Springsteen year in 2006. And the meters were playing opposite. And I was like, how are you supposed to do this? I mean, we've got Springsteen with this band we know is going to be horns and everything else. It's going to be great. At the other end, you've got like, the core, the DNA of funk happening, the meters. Like, how can you not go see the meters? So I joked and I said, I said, it's like I need a golf cart or something. So everyone, whatever. And then I'm sitting at home and I'm going, well, how hard would it be to get a golf cart in the fairgrounds? Really? When you think about it. So I started making a couple of phone calls, and I find this guy in Metry, and he's like, "Oh yeah, no, we supply the fest with all their golf carts." I go, "Oh, okay. Can I have a golf cart?" And the guy goes, "Yeah, sure. I don't know. Wait, will you deliver it?" I go, "Yeah." Holy crap. Okay. So I forget, it was like $40 or something for the day. And that year, my lanyard, and I was looking for it earlier, I didn't find it, but I had like these laminated passes that said like all asses pass, and I did it with a Canadian, but it looked like a backstage laminate, and I was hanging around my neck. So on the Sunday, I told the guy, I said, leave it beside the grandstand. And I told him exactly where to put it, put the key underneath. I get up Sunday morning, go there, there's my golf cart. And when you process this, you got to figure that at no point would like golf cart on a flatbed attract any attention from the Jazz Fest. It's exactly the same golf cart that they've brought umpteen times. It's like, well, it's another one. We already got 30 of them. What's another one? So they brought the thing over. That my golf cart was parked right beside Aaron Neville's. You don't get more perfect than that. And I get in this golf cart, but you have to realize this is after Katrina, so they didn't even have decals for the front of them like they do now. It was just a golf cart. And I spent that entire Sunday driving around the track, picking up complete strangers and going, get in. And they stopped the pedestrian traffic for me and let me boot through. And I had this shuttle running. It was just like, get in, let's go. Nobody stopped me. Nobody said a word. I just buzzed around the whole time. I had the time of my life. But changed it a little bit. I guess I don't think you can actually drive around the whole track, and I really don't know that I could have done it any other year other than the messed up post Katrina year when people were like, whatever, he must be somebody. He's got a golf cart.
I just want to say that Talking Threadheads does not endorse exploiting loopholes at Jazzfest and securing the use of golf carts. I'm just saying that our lawyers made us say that. The network.
Yes, we do.
Really?
We do endorse it.
only if you get me into that Sheridan tent, and then cool. Yeah. I just want the wine.
Probably 2 or 3 steps away from our own damn tent, to be honest with you.
I want to tell our viewers, I guess this is the fourth wall, when you break the fourth wall and you show the viewers that we actually have a sort of a script of questions. I'm gonna break the script here for a second.
Okay.
Don't you have a famous story about a night show from the 90s or something? Wasn't there like midgets involved or something?
Oh my God. Yeah. Well, I don't know how much of that I can tell. I will tell the story though, because it's interesting. It turned out that I had met Jen Rooney that night. Didn't even know. And we didn't even put it together till 20 years later, 30 years later, whatever it was. But yeah, you can Google this story. I was actually working for a big concert company down there called Beaver Productions, and they were Queen was launching jazz in New Orleans, birthplace of jazz. They kicked off their tour there, and they decided they were just going to have this epic party at the old Fairmont, which I think now the Roosevelt. I don't know. Anyway, this magnificent ballroom. It was October 31st, 1978. So I still have the little orange button. So they decided there was no budget for this thing, whatever it costs. So they sent people out in the street to grab like the freakiest people they could find on Halloween in New Orleans. And they grabbed hookers and streetwalkers and transvestites and like anybody and everybody. And they brought in all kinds of entertainment, right? They had like, I think a dozen women from New York dancing like big girls for like Fat Bottom Girls. Dirty Dozen played. It was like 16 different acts. But it was a pretty debauched party is all I'm going to say about that. They said, I remember reading a quote once, and it said some guy says there may or may not have been hermaphrodite dwarfs ferrying lines of cocaine on their bald heads. And I'm like, yeah, there was. So, they actually had like women dressed up in French maids as the waitress, and that was their hors d'oeuvres. It was an insane time. I actually got to the point where, because I figured nobody would ever believe this story, that I got on the phone and I phoned my sister. I said, Rhonda, you will not believe where I am right now. I said, I'm at this party. I've never seen anything like it. And Brian May walked past. I said, would you say hello to my sister? And he talked to her for like 15 minutes. So it's like, thank you. I have somebody can vouch for that.
This might be a good segue. First of all, thank you for telling us that second story.
I cleaned it up nicely, Chris.
You did.
Yeah.
Before the censors did. That might be a good segue though into talking to us about what's your first connection in New Orleans? You actually lived down there for a while?
Yeah, not by design. It was really strange. When I was 17, I guess, I was offered an academic scholarship at University of Miami. I thought, well, this is great, but I'm going to travel around a little bit on my way down there and see the U.S. So I found a deal on a bus pass, and we traveled around, and I was hitting like St. Louis and Nashville and all these places, and I get to New Orleans, and I just fell in love. It just hooked me so hard the first couple of days. In fact, give me an idea, the first 10 days I was there. The first day I was there was a race riot on Canal Street.
Wow.
I had fallen madly in love with this girl who worked at Peaches Records that was on there. And I thought it was great. And she goes, uh-oh. There was a white power rally or something that set up right down at the foot of Canal, and then like a black power group up by Rampart. And everyone starts closing down their blinds and everything and locking up their stores. And I'm like this Canadian kid from a town with 820 people. I'm like, great, scraps. I'm going to see some scraps. And it was like, oh, no, dude, you don't understand. This is real. So we got out of there at the right time. But within the next 10 days, I managed to get shot in a bank holdup and get fished out of Lake Pontchartrain by the Coast Guard. Both times it's like I'm calling my mom, and she's like, oh, my God, you have to come home. I'm like, are you kidding me? I just had a brush with death. So that was it. But I always tell people, like, everything I ever learned in my life, I learned in the year and a half that I lived in New Orleans. And I honestly believe that. Like, for all university would have done for me back then, it wasn't until I lived there, and I was lucky that I was so naive. I had no fear. I lived on Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard for 6 weeks. I had no idea it was a bad part of town. And it's like, you learn everything: lust, greed, larceny, love, hate, music, gluttony, like everything you'd ever want to learn in a year and a half, you're going to learn on the streets.
Everything you need to survive in the U.S. Yeah.
Pretty much. And it's served me, like it's come back over a lifetime a few times, going, okay, you've been here before. This is the spot where you turn around and head back. You can tell this is a little sketch, but yeah, I owe a lot to it. I call it my spiritual homeland, and I believe that in my heart.
Love it. That's great.
Tell us a little bit about how you got involved with the Threadheads. How'd you learn about them, and what's your involvement then?
Well, my involvements, first of all, I learned about them because my first tribe was Pet to Cat Crew with Joe Perez, may he rest in peace. But that whole group, I was yearning for information about Jazzfest. It's funny now because you see it and people are just like, well, I don't understand. Like, what do I bring? And when does this thing close? That was me. And people are like, just show up. I'm like, it's not that easy. If you've never been, you want to know, you'd have no visual of what this really looks like. So I'm pretty forgiving when people want it, but these guys were great. And they sort of took me under wing, and all of a sudden we had a little tribe. And that tribe, almost all of it, I think, pretty much morphed over into the Threadheads. So like when you guys moved in, I was already living there. It's too hard to kick me out at that point.
I love it. Let's talk about the Patriot. Tell us about some of your favorite shows from the Patriot, or favorite moments. It doesn't necessarily have to be about the music, because there's the people and the food. Talk to us about that.
There's been a few good ones, man. I mean, I love that event so much. And unfortunately, like, this is, almost all of my experiences at the Patriot, and I don't want to paint the wrong picture here, have been a direct result of edibles. Like, really, it's like edibles that just, I remember the first time I've tried one of Barry's fine desserts, and I had one. I'm like, I'm not feeling anything. And I ate like 2 more. And by like 2 o'clock or something, I was curled up in a fetal position in the bushes in the back. And I like kind of look at my watch, and it's like 2 o'clock, and you start doing the math, like 10 minus 2. Oh my God, how am I going to do this? So that became kind of an event. I went, okay, that's not happening again. Like, that's a teaching moment for me right then and there. It's like, I learned so much from that moment. And in a related note, a couple of years ago, I was beer tending. I was working we were at the Ironworks, and John Green's wife, Lise, comes up to me and she says, like, do you want a cookie? I go, yeah, sure. So I take this cookie and I open it up and I'm eating it away and talking to her. And she goes, at the end of it all, she goes, well, I can't believe you ate all that. That's like Colorado napalm. It's like, nobody can eat this. Like, I can only eat half. I'm like, what the hell? What happened? And all of a sudden, now it comes my shift and it's kicking in hard. And I remember grabbing Lisa, you know, from Windsor, Corona. I'm like, Lisa, you got to help me, man. and so she stood there and I equate it to like being out of control, like on an icy road in Canada. And I'm like tapping the brakes and I'd reach down for a drink and say, no, don't do that. And I'd pull it out of a skid. And by the end of the hour, I was like high-fiving myself. I couldn't believe that I pulled it out at the last minute. It was just like, I can't believe we did that. But yeah, I've enjoyed them so much. Now, one of the other ones was bittersweet, and you have to forgive me because I can't remember if it was Rhea or who it was, but when we scattered her ashes at the front of the stage.
Oh yeah, Rhea, yeah.
It was Mel's or somebody, and that was their wish that they would do that. And I just remember having some ashes in my hand, and it was really sweet moment. But I've had so many good moments there. I really have. One of my favorites was actually sitting when we were at the Ironworks, and I went, you know, I just wandering around. I did a couple of good ones. So I was just wandering around. I go into the little the area, like the big indoor area, and there's, you know, Miss Irma Thomas eating her crawfish with her purse sitting on the table. And so I sat down and had just a great conversation with Miss Irma. You know, it's like, when are you going to do that? Right?
That's great.
Are you sure that wasn't after you ate one of those brownies?
I could very well have been. Could totally have been. I'm not sure.
I had a similar situation, and I shouldn't say this because like my family's enjoying watching these, but Brian Friedman, the devil himself, like he and I were beer tending, and he was like, he's like, hey, because we always used to beer tend together. He's like, hey, have some of these berries brownies. Like, you've never had them, you'll like them, but only have a little. And I like had a little, and we're like pouring beer and we're dancing and, you know, doing our thing. And I'm like, give me more of that.
Right.
Yeah, take a little more. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, this is no biggie. You know, my tolerance must be awesome, right? And then our shift ends, and I go across the street to get some pizza for dinner. And I'm in the pizza restaurant, and I'm just like, oh my God. Is it lunch or is it dinner? Should I get more than one? Do I have money? What is going on? And then I took my food back and I sat down and I ate it. And then I straight up left the pantry. I went to, I was staying someplace around, like really close by. And so I walked over there and I laid down in my room, and Brian messaged me like 2 hours later. He's like, where are you? We're all leaving. And I'm like, I'm done. Like I'm wiped out. It was the end of me.
Well, they had one year, I remember when we had it at the Airbnb on Frenchman Street. And I was there, and I was a free range chicken. I was just bopping around right by the front. And I see this woman on the other side of the gate, all dressed in white, you know, black woman with like hair and braids and everything. And she's dancing like crazy out in the street to the band. So I'm dancing with her. Like I'm on the other side of, it's like, you know, I'm on the other side of the gate. And then she looks at me and she goes, that's my family song. And it was Charmaine Neville. Oh, wow. And that band from St. Louis that we had years ago, if you remember. And I think they were playing like Hey Pocky Way or something. So I just like, this Charmaine Neville's out in the street. So I went out and grabbed her, and Kermit was playing that year. And Kermit was like, great, come on back later on. I mean, it was just very cool to see a Neville dancing on the street, you know, to Hey Pocky Way at our party.
Wasn't that Gumbo Road? Wasn't that the band?
Gumbo something. Yeah, you got it. Yeah.
I think so.
Good. I can't remember what song it was. If it was Hey Pocky Way or something like that they did. But it was just funny.
Just for the millions of people who are watching, the reason my memory is so sharp is because I don't do any of the drugs that you guys.
Right.
I only did it once. Just once, one time. That's it. I didn't inhale.
Yeah, same here.
CBD
I don't even
drops
know why
right
we're
in.
talking about it. It's just horrid.
I know, right? Yeah, I'll edit it out. The network will let us know how they feel about it. We haven't edited
Pretty sad that
anything,
that's
so I
all
think
all
I'll
the
learn
good
how to use the software tonight.
Yeah, there you go.
pretty sad that all the good
Um,
stories start with Barry's brownies. I mean, really.
Yeah.
Everything starts and ends with Barry's brownies. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So Ross, tell us on that note, on that really fun and joyful note, what is it about Jazzfest that keeps you coming back year after year?
You know, it's interesting because for the longest time, I always believed that it was just the tribe. You know what I mean? I don't have friends like that in Toronto. I really don't. A lot of people don't. I don't know a lot about people's private lives and how they live their life. We see them as we see them at Jazzfest. And Jazzfest, I'm really in my element. I'm not nearly as social as I appear at Jazzfest. Like in my real life, I'm kind of a hermit. But I love, sort of throwing it out every year. In fact, the first year that we went in '96, I remember, I think it was the Nevilles or somebody was doing a cover version of a Sly and the Family Stone song. And my sister looked at me and sort of mouthed the lyrics of like, "Thank you for letting me be myself."
Mm.
And it was just so powerful because it's a funk song. Usually you sing it and everything else, but it was like, be myself again. But lately, I think it's gone a little bit deeper. Like I was reading this book by Dan Levitin. I don't know if you've ever seen his stuff, but it's like he wrote a book called Your Brain on Music. And it turns out that, and this makes so much sense to me now, that different types of music stimulate different parts of your brain and different things. If you're singing, for example, if you're singing along, it fires up one part of your brain. If you're listening to gospel, it fires up something else. Funk fires up. And I realized it's like, well, that's our experience at Fest, right? I mean, we're getting all of these stimuli to the point when I come back, my brain's firing. I like it really is. It's more scientific than I think we give it credit for. That we're able to sort of push all those buttons. If all we had was what we normally have and what we normally listen to, I don't think we'd come back that way. But I really believe there's value in that. That the gospel side is not a side that I fire up on a regular basis. But if you've experienced it, if you've been in the tent and you've been part of that, then you know that there's a part of you that has been dormant for a while. I love it.
I'm going to go off script again for a second. Have you decided whether you're coming down in October?
Yeah, I kind of have. Like, I don't think I'll be able to do it this year. It's just it's strange because I've got to overlay the fact that I'm in a different country, and they're now just sort of opening up the border. As far as I know, they haven't even opened it up in the U.S. to Canadians yet, which is part of it. But the numbers, we're just approaching things very, very different.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, I think to give you an idea, I think yesterday we had like 440 cases in all of Canada, and they're still shut down. Like, we still don't have live entertainment. We still don't, like, they're barely into like phase 3 of allowing certain people in restaurants. And then I see, what's happening in the States and just kind of roll my eyes. And due to some health issues, I'm considered at risk. I've double vaccinated, but I just think of that whole environment. I'm going, you got people screaming at someone on the other side of the bar going, Tua beat us, and all the germs are flying at them from all across the South and all across the world. And I'm like, yeah, no, let's work this out. I'll be back in the spring, but right now I don't think it's a good idea for me to be there.
All right, so let me ask you, if you were to have come down, just theoretically, what's your go-to Jazz Fest food?
You know what? This is really boring because I'm not one of these guys. I used to like totally go for the exotic, get the most exotic stuff I could find. But I'm finding I can't really eat a lot of gloopy stuff there anymore, right? I mean, I can really carb out if I wanted to at that thing. So I started getting more strategic. So I would eat like a big breakfast, which is all, every day I eat as big a breakfast as I can. And I sort of coast for the day. And I found recently I was eating like more like heavy protein stuff, like the turkey legs, fried chicken, things like that, where there was some substance to it. Because there was one point when I remember sitting there, I was eating something, I went, oh man, I could spend $30 on food here like really easy and still not really get a lot of food.
Mm-hmm.
It's great food, but I thought, treat yourself. That $30, go spend it at Coops or someplace where you can actually sit down and really enjoy what you're eating. So, I mean, I'll try the odd thing every once in a while, but I don't have a go-to that does it for me.
But high protein, I like that.
Yeah.
I definitely like that.
Something, I
Solid,
mean,
yeah, solidarity as a person who has a digestive disorder that limits my selections. I understand.
Me
you
too.
see,
Me too. There's things I want to eat, but things I choose not to eat.
There's things that I'll be like, can I smell that? Like one of my friends will get something, I'll be like, can I like just kind of take a big sniff of that because it smells so delicious, or like a taste of the sauce. But that's about it for me.
yeah, it's funny because I'm really the opposite. You get all the people that get, all like wired up for things like crawfish Monica, and I'm like, that's the last thing I want to eat in a hot day. Is like fish Monica, like honest to God, I was just like, no. We get it cold, fine, but it just like does nothing for me at all.
Hey, before we sign off, can we see Charlie?
You can try. Charlie, wake up. Come here. Come here, boo-boo. Can you stand up? There's
I'm
Charlie.
so excited.
There's Charlie. We see his body. We don't see his head yet.
Down, bubble.
There he
There he
is.
is.
He's been
What
singing lately. Oh my God, I wish I could turn you on to that. He's got a selection now. It turns out like there's like 2 or 3 Steely Dan songs, and now he's like, if we play something like Sissy Strut, I get singing. If anything with harmonica, I get singing. And today I was just like, shut up, you're killing my song, man. Right place, wrong time. I've got like a long playlist, and they're like some of my favorite songs. And it's just like, it's funny the first time, maybe even the second, but when you're listening to like Sneaking Sally Through the Alley, and this guy's howling all, it's just like, shut up, man.
I love it.
I heard him yesterday. We had Wet Willie Keep On Smiling playing, and I see he's down there, and it's like, oh my God, he's like whimpering. I'm like, oh my God, poor guy. Like, what's going on? I couldn't even hear it. It was in the house. I was in the balcony, and I reached down. I can just hear him like whimpering, and he's singing. He's singing the song. He can hear it, and he's singing at the same volume. He's a wonderful guy. Oh, you wanted to witness the ass pass.
Oh, yes.
Yes,
Oh,
the
before
ass
we hang
pass.
up.
Did I blow this?
No, this is
Big
perfect.
reveal.
That is perfect.
Amazing. So perfect. Well, on that note.
This would be good for the vaccines, I think.
Yeah.
They didn't figure it out. It was just like I could,
Wait, are you
Yeah.
telling us that with an ass pass you can get into Jazzfest without being vaccinated
Yeah,
or
I would
without
think
showing a
so.
test? Yeah,
I would
exactly.
think. I remember when somebody who's pretty tight with Jazzfest came up to me, and she's like, "Oh, wow, that's amazing! I can't believe they gave you permission to use those guys." I'm like, "Permission? Wait, you asked permission? That's not happening here." See, I'm lucky. That's one of the beauty of being in a different country. It's like, sue me. All right, bring it. Try to sue me in a different jurisdiction. Knock yourself out.
On that note, thank you so much for being on our show. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, guys. I really appreciate it.
Stay healthy, Ross. Can't wait to see you in the spring.
You too.
All right, guys. Talk to you later.
Okay. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.